Hey, 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 aloha, everybody. And man, I'm so glad you're here. Listen, I apologize that I came to you recorded this time versus live on a Monday night. However, it is with great excitement that I do in that scenario is because I am recording right now this morning and then heading out the door crazy to go to the hospital for delivery of the new granddaughter. So yes, so excited. So aloha and very interesting that it all comes together today in the topic that I was had chosen for this week's Zoom and getting the daughter here. So over the weekend, I was in San Diego and had another great event that I was teaching, and overheard. I was, oh my gosh, let me start all over. I'm so excited about things. Anyway, down in San Diego, teaching a class, and so excited about things and having a great time. I hadn't been out teaching for quite some time. I usually am monitoring and watching over, and support and so forth. This time I had an opportunity to teach. And so several things that went on. One of the an additional great things is in teaching. I was also start all over, and you guys can tell I'm so excited about getting to that baby. Um, my oldest daughter was also with me, and so she was working the support side and supporting me in it. So anyway, had this great event. Loved it. It was excellent to get out there. Did trash my voice a little bit because I haven't been at training and so forth, but I had somebody that said, and it stayed with me, and I need to bring that in because I believe that's what the Aloha Operating System is truly about. They said people need more love. Just absolutely need more love. And I nodded and I moved on, of course, but later on, I got thinking about that. And the more and more I thought about it, more and more I realized that most people know how to love others. Most people know how to support others, know how to support their children, know how to encourage their spouse. Most people, they know how to forgive their friends. But when life becomes very difficult, this is the part that got me, is more people have a hard time or difficult time extending that same grace to themselves. And that's what I want to bring up is not love as an emotion, not love as romance, but love as an operating system. Okay. Because you know how to treat knowing how to treat yourself during difficult seasons determines the quality of every season that follows. Right. So the biggest challenge that we have is I made this comment is that we're easy on others, hard on ourselves. And because most of you coming onto this are builders, right? Most of these conversations uh, that we're having every week, okay, there are things that are going on that you're dealing with all the time. You're carrying pressure and different responsibilities and expectations, even obligations. And what happens is after so many years of carrying all of those things, dangerous patterns begin to emerge. Okay. You start measuring your value by your performance. When business is good, you feel good. When you money is flowing, when money is flowing, you feel successful, right? When everything is working, you feel worthy. And what happens though is when the numbers start to dip, or a project fails, or life becomes uncertain because oh my gosh, anything, right? A loss of a job, a loss of a vehicle, a breakdown of a vehicle, anything. When life becomes uncertain because of the dangerous patterns that we've created over time, self-worth some suddenly comes under attack. And what it is most of the time it's not from other people. right? Because of that word, if you think about it, self-worth, right? Suddenly it comes from us. The challenge is majority of people around us do not even know we're going through this stuff. And this is where the biggest issues begin because your value cannot rise and fall with circumstances. If it does, your entire life emotionally, or you're spending your entire life emotionally reacting to temporary conditions. So you cannot rise and fall with circumstances. And if you've based all of your value, your self-worth on external, then you're going to spend your life emotionally reacting to temporary conditions, not acting through them, right? I always have said, man, if I could just get if I could just get the voices in my head to fly in formation, I'm doing good. Right? So let's talk a little bit about the voices in your head. And I say voices. Okay. We could call it a voice. I'm going to call it voices. And it's not the voice of your spouse or your boss or your partner or social media, right? It's the voice that speaks when nobody else is around. When nobody else is around, that quiet moment, right? When you miss a goal, what do you say? When you make a mistake, what do you say? When things don't go according to plan, what does it say? Now, and I always will flip flop in between this when I'm talking to you guys and stuff and say, okay, what does it say or what do you say? Well, what does that voice say? What are you saying to yourself? Because whatever it says reveals the current invisible software you're running. Right. And people don't realize this. The subconscious listens to repetition. The subconscious accepts identity, and the subconscious installs what it hears most often. Because right, because we got to understand the subconscious mind does not understand the difference between fantasy and reality. It's all reality to the subconscious mind. It's all reality in that, just like your computer does not know whether it's you're being serious, being comedic, being emotional. It doesn't know. It's just processing things. That's the software. So the subconscious being that invisible software, right? It installs what it hears the most often. And if your internal conversations, okay, or in constantly criticism or doubt or frustration or disappointment, then eventually your life begins reflecting that installation. Repeats, repeats, right? So at AOS, that what we want to get across is that we don't improve life by fighting outcomes. We improve life by upgrading the operating system that's creating those outcomes. That's a huge difference on this, right? So many of us, and myself included, have gone to um, I've gone to seminar after seminar after seminar and have started receiving all of those motivational things, right? And so forth. And the majority of those seminars are focused on outcomes. Go here, learn this strategy, invest in real estate. Go here, learn this strategy, invest in on a stock market, start an Etsy, start whatever online businesses and so forth. And it's always about outcomes. And then you go to these that are motivational, right? Whether it's oh shoot, I'll even name them here. Whether it's a Grant Cardone or a Tony Robbins or anything that's out there, the majority of their push is about outcomes. Now, I'm going to pull Tony back on that because Tony has some phenomenally multi-deep, not levels, but multiple levels, if you will, of training. A lot of it is just on outcomes and so forth. but more majority of his stuff is fighting the internal or working with the internal. What we are doing is pushing hard to improve life by upgrading the operating system. That's why we call it the Aloha Operating System. Why? Somebody asked me that over the last week. Why do I call it the Aloha Operating System? I'm going to go way back to the beginning on this one, and it's simply because the spirit of aloha is love. Absolutely, it's aloha, right? And the old, I'm repeating this one, but you got to understand where I'm coming from with this whole thing. The the native original way of greeting people was forehead to forehead, right? Nose to nose on here. So now you're right in each other's face, and then it's breathing each other's aloha, breathing that life back together. So it's all love, right? It's all love. And so when you understand that you're coming from the love operating system, aloha operating system, you're running in the direction of everything is based in love. And when you understand that what love actually means, okay, then it changes things because when most people hear self-love, they often think of weakness, right? They think of lowering standards or let me go a different direction, right? Self-love, self-love has so many different definitions by people, right? Self-love, um, I mean, oh man, my goodness, excuse me. Self-love is not lowering your standards. Self-love, in my opinion, is growing your standards. It's stepping yourself up because you're taking care of you, right? So many people, and uh, I was raised this way by my mom, that self-love was weakness. It lowered the standards. It was an excuse. That's not what I'm talking about. It's not lowering standards. Okay. It is all about loving yourself enough that you can use love to improve without attacking, right? Without self-attacking. You use love as correction, not condemnation, or without condemnation. You use love as accountability, not shame. So that's the difference. That's what true self love is. Love is saying, I can do better without saying I'm less. They're completely different statements. One creates growth, the other creates resistance. And as you start into that, you start understanding where it's coming. Let me share with you a personal. Let me share with you a personal, and then I'm going to get into an exercise here. Years ago. Let's see. I would that. Oh my gosh, this is my first marriage, so this would have been 40. Yeah, I guess I was just still in my 20s, and I got into sales, and I got into life insurance sales. And anybody who's ever been into sales knows that sales are a little more difficult, take a little different skill. Anybody who's ever been in life insurance sales knows that it takes an additional a skill to get into and scale that up and so forth, because it's one of those, right? Those must negative, the negative positive, right? You're positive, you need that life insurance, but it's negative because it's life insurance and you're talking about death. And, it's just one of those necessary evils, as so many call it, as I was doing it. But I've always been I've always been one driven by internal. I've always been one driven by what is my subconscious doing, always working on that. And I've always known that if I could have a conversation with myself at the subconscious level, then what I was going to do was have a true conversation with myself, not just a surface level. So I got into hypnosis. and hypnotherapy. And any of you who have participated in that, you know where I'm going with this. If you haven't, it might be an area you might want to check out and look into. I'm not going one way or another. That's up to you. But anyway, I got into hypnosis, and I figured that that was be a way to quiet my conscious, so that then there could be a conversation with the subconscious and work things out. So I found a gentleman, and amazing, amazing, amazing gentleman. And he walked me through some things. And it was very interesting because what he had me do with the visual exercise is, in closing my eyes and in the hypnotic state, he had me walk to a front door, knock on the door to sell life insurance. And it was interesting because as it was going through all of that, I felt myself getting that, my breathing changed. It shortened it, and it increased beats faster or breaths faster, right? So it increased everything, heart rate changing and so forth, because I had anxiety to sell, and yet I had chosen to be in the sales industry. And he asked me, okay, what are you feeling? I said, all of this. And he goes, great, let's give it a name. I gave it anxiety. He then said, okay, where do you feel that in your body? And I said, right here, center chest. And he said, okay, great, that's anxiety. Now we have that, right? Excellent. Now, the next thing he did is he took me in, they call it age regression, but he took me in a past movement, and he had me search through the files in my software program at that time, right? He had me go through my subconscious files and had me find the time where I first felt that same feeling. So as I went and scanned, going backwards in my life, I came to 12 years old. And at 12 years old, I found myself the first time I'd ever felt that anxiety. And he asked me what was going on. What did I see? What was the visual? And I was standing having a conversation with my dad. Now, it wasn't a conversation, it was a screaming match. And you've heard me talk about my school days. I hated school, never liked anything about school. And it started basically seventh grade, somewhere right in there, which has got to be pretty close to that 12 years old. Hated everything about it. Just didn't like it. So that was the time I felt that. And what was happening in that was the first time I felt what was happening in that is my dad was screaming at me about or over my bad report card. My report cards were awful. My grades were awful. And he was just yelling at me on and just back. And I'm yelling back and forth. And from that point on, we discovered that that's where my anxiety was coming from. Not because my dad yelled at me, but because I was not in control of what I needed to do, right? So I wasn't doing any of my schoolwork and so forth. And so then in not doing the schoolwork and knowing not doing the schoolwork, and then the grade time comes, right? And grades are going to be issued and released. And way back then, it doesn't happen now, right? All of us know we used to get grade report, report cards, I guess we call them. But you'd get your paper, right? It wasn't all this electronic stuff. And then it was, I had to take that paper home, and I had to show my parents that paper. And it wasn't that I could hide it, because my parents were always involved with our lives, right? And so when I come home, it was like, okay, let's see your report card. So now I'm all hyperventilating, anxiety, and everything else kicking in, that I've got to hand this report card over, knowing that they were bad grades and knowing that I was just going to get my head ripped off. So that's where the anxiety happened. And all through the years then after, when things would play in that I would play short, right, in my own life, if I would do something that I would play short on, school type stuff, you understand what I mean by playing short? If I do something that I play short on, then I'd have the accountability time, and that accountability would then cause anxiety. Now, let's fast forward into the sales. Why was I anxious about going into sales? Well, because I had to present to that family. I had to present to that family. And I never realized this until he helped me, that I never felt confident enough in the presentation to give the presentation. So now I'm going to do straightforward. I'm going to do a half-assed presentation. And so I was anxious about that because the fear of what they were going to say, retaliate, whatever. Is that making sense? So he helped me with that. He helped me discover that. And you're probably sitting on the other side of this going, my goodness, your whole business is about presenting. Your whole career is about presenting. Every Monday night I present. I'm on the weekend on the road and I present. Absolutely, because he helped me kick through it. So let me finish the story. So he helped me find that. And then it was great. Now come back. So walking myself, subconsciously walking back to the room. And when I got back into the present with him, he then started talking to me and asking me my age. I think it was 27. I'm just going to go with that. I don't remember the date. Okay. Or the age of the date. Um, 27. You're how old? 27. Is that an adult? Yes. And he worked with me right in that few minutes right there of saying, yes, I am adult. I am. And this is where I am, and so forth. And so he had me ground that in of where I stood at the point. The next step was he had me go back in time, back to the 12 again, but this time as the 27-year-old adult, as a grown man, grown adult, and go back and view the yelling, screaming match, the exact moment that was seeded, right, planted in me, and go back and observe it from an outsider. So now I go back, subconsciously going through that, and I see my 12-year-old self and my dad, and we're going at it. We're going at it. Then his comment to me was, now, what is your dad truly saying to your 12-year-old self? Now, what is he screaming? What is he truly saying? And what it came down to is, son, I love you. You're stronger than this. You have the abilities to do this, not better than this. You're stronger than this. You're able to do this. You have the capabilities of doing this. It simply takes some study. This is what we can help you with, and on and on and on. And then he had me go to the other side and saying, what is the 12-year-old self receiving? And it was, you lazy, you bomb, you, all of the negatives, what I was receiving. And so that's what the conflict was that happened. Then what he did is he had me come back to present, walked through it all again, what was being said, what was being received, and so forth. Do you understand what your dad was telling you, and so forth? What the dad was telling your 12-year-old self, and on and on and on. Once I had that good understanding, then what he did is he had me have a conversation with my 12-year-old self and explain to that 12-year-old self what my dad was saying, what he truly was coming from, a basis of love, not hate, not anger, where I had received it as hate and anger. And he had me walk back and then talk to my 12-year-old son, getting teared up on this one, had me talk to my 12-year-old self, I should say, not son, my 12-year-old self, and bring that. As soon as I was able to do that, then I moved forward and I came back to the present and then enforced what I had learned. And that right there was the changing period, the changing part of my whole internal software. I didn't know it though. I didn't know it. I didn't know that's what that meant. All I knew is I started having better sales. I started being able to Oh, the last part, apologize. Let me finish it up. Once we had all that done, he then had me visualize walking up to a door, knock on the door to give a presentation on life insurance. And it was crazy. That feeling was gone. It started up, but then it subsided. And the more and more I worked internally on that software to make sure I was using correct software and reinforcing it, that changed. I don't get that now. It may rise itself up quickly. I have a an anchor word um, that brings me back in. My wife knows that anchor word well and uses it every time I go to present because I will have that excitement. Man, those that have worked with me, Mark, you know that out there. I will pace before I present. I'll pace back and forth because I start to get nervous. And then all of a sudden, I'll send a text message to my wife and I'll say, "Showtime." And my key anchor word that always comes back from her is breathe. Breathe. That's an anchor word. So let me do this with the exercise. Imagine a child standing before you, maybe a child, maybe a son, daughter, maybe even yourself. Okay. And the child says to you, "I made a mistake." What do you say? Would you attack them? Would you humiliate them? Would you tell them they're hopeless? I'm going to sit on this side and say, no, I doubt it. I highly doubt that. I'm thinking you would teach them, you would guide them, you would encourage them. I think you would help them stand back up. I think you may even put your arms around them, right? I think you would be all in that. It would all be based on love, right? They come in and, man, yes, yesterday, Father's Day, watching my little ones and the little 2-year old grandson, right? There was just some things and he fell, that kind of stuff. And so, man, he made a mistake. Well, okay, so we're going to yell at him. No, man, it all came from love, right? So if that's the approach we're taking with that, why do we abandon that approach when we're dealing with ourselves, right? Somewhere along the line, I promise you, somewhere along the line, we became less compassionate towards ourselves than we are towards strangers. That's not strength. That's misalignment, guys. That is all misalignment. But here's the beauty. Here's the beauty is we're not behind. One of the biggest sources of suffering today is comparison. People that are behind financially, professionally, spiritually, socially, behind everyone else. Okay. Here's what I've learned. Life isn't a popularity contest. It isn't a race. Okay. It's an installation process. Every lesson, every setback, every challenge, every season is building something inside you. The problem is that most people judge the construction site before they have the building finished. AOE's, oh my gosh. The Aloha Operating System teaches patience with the process. Not because, excuse me, not because the progress isn't important, but you've got to understand that growth takes place before results become visible. Okay. Growth takes place before the results become visual. Okay. I think it was, oh my gosh, one of the great authors that said, the only place that success comes before work is in the dictionary, right? Because you got to have the work, you got to have all of that. So think about this. Think about this, okay? What happens? What happens to a plant when it receives proper conditions? It grows. I came home. I came home on the road, and a section in the front yard, grass is dying. right? It's just dying. So that means I've got a sprinkler issue, right? Because it's not getting the proper condition. So when it has proper water and so forth, that grass is going to grow. So when a plant receives proper condition, it grows. Well, what happens to a person when they live in a supportive, uh, excuse me, when they live in a supportive conditions internally? They grow. Not because it's forced, right? Because that growth is natural. The builder's job, right, is not constant punishment. The builder's job is creating conditions for a business, for family, and most importantly for ourselves. When you create an environment of respect, patience, discipline, self support, growth becomes sustainable, not opportunity. It becomes sustainable. Okay, and that's what you're looking for is the growth, sustained growth, because this hit and miss temporary because of external outcomes, the hit and miss, that's not sustainable. That is not sustainable. We've talked about being tired last week. We talked about being aligned from last week. We talked about those things. But if you don't have sustained growth, you're going to always be wiped out. You're always going to be in that position, right? So I'm going to use my daughter right now. Okay, those of the attendees here that have female wise that have had children, those who have been involved with it, that watched the women giving birth, know exactly what I'm talking about here. Is that they called it Braxton, or they call it Braxton Hicks, which means you have some contractions. I can't call them false contractions because they're there, but they're not the let's deliver contractions. And so they hit, and then days later they may hit, right? And then they start hitting a little bit more. They start hitting a little bit more. And it was just even seriously, even this morning, we had a call. It's like 4 o'clock in the morning. My daughter, 4 or 5 o'clock, something like that. She's like, "Yeah, the contractions are more intense." We're like, okay, great. How consistent are they? Well, they're more intense. How consistent are they? And in conversations between mom and daughter, right? It's like, okay, we're going to go to the hospital. Okay, hang on. How consistent are they? Well, the doctor said that when they get more intense, that I should come in. But how consistent? Because you could have an intense one and 4 hours later, another intense one. That's not pushing it down, right? That is not, the environment's not quite ready. So it is now in that scenario of going, okay, now we're just going to monitor the closeness of those. Why I bring that up is because when you create the environment of respect, patience, discipline, you create sustainable growth. For the daughter, when you create everything is right, when the body is creating everything right, then all of a sudden it's like, we're going to push this baby out. It's time for this baby out. So now it's coming in with the discipline and the same thing. It's over. Now it's sustainable. Now it's sustainable. This is what you've got to do in your life, right? Because the operating system, the Aloha operating system is what we want to do is that so many people spend years trying to improve the outputs, income, better health, better relationship, better results. But the practitioners of this over and over creating that sustainable growth are the ones who are working on the internal. So tonight's question, or today's question, so used to presenting at night, okay? This week's question is, what kind of environment exists inside your mind? Write that down. What kind of environment exists in your mind? Then followed up with this question. Would you want your child living in that environment? Would you want your spouse living in that environment? Would you want your best friend living in that environment? And if the answer is no to any of those three questions, then perhaps it's time for an upgrade, because the relationship you have with yourself becomes from becomes the relationship you have with yourself becomes the foundation for every other relationship you have in your life. I'm going to end with this. Close your eyes, take a slow breath, Breathe it in, breathe it out, and then repeat this. I am learning. I am growing. I am guided. I am supported. I stand with myself. I speak to myself with strength. I correct without condemning. I improve without attacking. I rise with calm authority. I choose alignment. I choose patience. I choose progress. I choose love as my operating system. Love is the environment where strength grows. Love is the foundation where resilience is built. And love is the ability to present to others. Love is the ability to remain present while improvement unfolds. And beginning today, I choose to stand on my own. I choose to build from alignment. I choose to move forward with calm authority because calm is a calm is a competitive advantage. And building in my life becomes unstoppable when I stop abandoning myself during the storm. Building in my life based on everything I just read to you and just shared with you. You become unstoppable because you stop abandoning yourself during the storm. So grateful for all of you. Thank you so much for listening. Repeat this one over and over. Go back and watch this one. Go through those last lines again. Time to upgrade, time to change, time to do all of that kind of stuff, time to cease abandoning yourself during the storm, time to love yourself. With all of that, thank you so much. I'll keep you posted on the baby, and aloha.